The day my father threw my toolbox into the February snow, metal wrenches scattering across the driveway like broken promises, he told me I'd never amount to anything more than grease under someone else's nails. He stood in the doorway of the house I grew up in, arms crossed over his silk tie, and said the word mechanic like it was something he'd scraped off his shoe. I was 19, my hands still smelling of engine oil from my apprenticeship at Sal's Auto, and I didn't cry, not then. But 13 months later, when I pulled into his luxury dealership lot in a midnight blue Aston Martin DB11 he'd spent 3 years trying to acquire, and handed him a detailing uniform with his name stitched above the pocket, I watched something crack behind his eyes. That's when I finally understood. Some bridges don't burn. They rebuild themselves in ways no one expects. The call came on a Tuesday morning in March, exactly 51 weeks after my father locked the door behind me. I was under a 2003 Accord at Sal's, replacing a rusted exhaust manifold, when my phone buzzed against the concrete floor. The number was local but unfamiliar. I almost didn't answer. Grease was caked under my nails, and I was 3 hours into an 8-hour shift. But something about the persistent vibration made me wipe my hands on my coveralls and swipe to accept. "Is this Marcus Webb?" The voice was female, professional, with the clipped efficiency of someone who made these calls often. "Yeah, who's this?" "Leah Ortiz from Hastings and Low. I'm calling regarding the estate of Vincent Rossi." The name hit me like a wrench to the chest. Vincent Rossi. My mother's uncle. The man I'd met exactly twice in my life. Once at a family reunion when I was 7, and once at my mother's funeral 6 years ago. He'd been a quiet, broad-shouldered man who smelled like cologne and old leather, and who'd given me a firm handshake and a business card I'd lost within a week. I hadn't thought about him since. "I'm sorry to inform you that Mr. Rossi passed away last month," Leah continued, her tone practiced but not unkind. "You're listed as a primary beneficiary in his will. Can you come to our office this Friday at 2? I stared at the undercarriage of the Accord, oil dripping into the pan beneath me. "Beneficiary? Are you sure you have the right person?" "Marcus Anthony Webb, born April 14, 2005, son of Elena Rossi Webb?" "That's me." "Then yes, we need you to sign some documents. There are assets involved." "Assets?" The word felt foreign, like something that belonged to people who wore suits and had investment portfolios. I told her I'd be there and hung up, my heart drumming against my ribs. Sal poked his head under the car, his gray beard streaked with something that might have been transmission fluid. "Everything okay, kid?" "I think I just inherited something." "Better be a winning lottery ticket," he said, grinning. "Otherwise, finish that manifold. We got 3 more cars lined up." But when Friday came and I sat across from Leah Ortiz in a glass-walled office that overlooked the downtown skyline, I realized it was better than a lottery ticket. Vincent Rossi had owned Rossi Premier Motors, a luxury car dealership on the north side of the city that specialized in European imports, Porsches, Jaguars, Maseratis, the kind of vehicles my father used to drive past and sigh over like they were unattainable art. And now, according to the will Leah slid across her desk, it was mine. "Mr. Rossi had no children," Leah explained, tapping a pen against the document. "He was estranged from most of his family, but he kept track of you. Said you reminded him of himself when he was young, hands-on, not afraid of hard work." I stared at the paperwork, at the name Marcus Webb typed neatly beside the phrase sole proprietor. "I met him twice." "He knew. He also knew your father kicked you out last year." Vincent had opinions about Richard Webb. The mention of my father's name made my jaw tighten. Richard Webb, owner of Webb Financial Consulting, a man who measured success in quarterly earnings and viewed anything involving physical labor as beneath him. He'd wanted me to go to business school, to follow his footsteps into a world of spreadsheets and client dinners. When I told him I'd rather rebuild engines than push paper, he'd called me a disappointment. When I showed up with my apprenticeship papers from Sal's, he'd called me worse. "There are conditions," Leah said, pulling me back to the present. "You have to run the dealership for at least 1 year. If you sell it before then, the proceeds go to charity. Vincent wanted to make sure you'd give it a real shot." I nodded slowly, my mind racing. A luxury car dealership? Me?
A 19-year-old who still lived in a studio apartment above a laundromat and ate ramen 3 nights a week? When can I see it? I asked. Leah smiled. How about Monday?
Rossi Premier Motors sat on a corner lot that stretched half a city block, its glass showroom gleaming under the late morning sun. I pulled up in my beat-up Honda Civic, a car I'd rebuilt from a salvage yard find, and felt immediately out of place. The lot was lined with vehicles that cost more than most people's houses: a pearl-white Bentley Continental, a fire-engine red Ferrari 488, a sleek black Porsche 911 Turbo that seemed to hum with restrained power even while parked. Inside, the showroom smelled like new leather and expensive coffee. A woman in her mid-30s looked up from the reception desk, her expression shifting from polite curiosity to mild confusion when she saw my work boots and faded jeans. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone suggesting I'd wandered into the wrong building. "I'm Marcus Webb. I'm here to meet with the management team." Her eyes widened. Oh, you're Vincent's nephew?" "Great nephew, technically." She stood quickly, smoothing her blouse. "I'm Rachel Delgado. I was Vincent's office manager. We've been waiting." She gestured toward a hallway that led to the back offices, her heels clicking against the polished floor. "Everyone's in the conference room." The management team consisted of 4 people: Rachel, Tom Garrison, the head of sales, a silver-haired man in his 50s who looked like he'd stepped out of a cologne ad, Elena Pace, the finance director, sharp-eyed and skeptical, and David Lee, the service manager, who was the only one who smiled when I walked in. "So you're the kid," Tom said, leaning back in his chair. "No offense, but Vincent never mentioned you." "He mentioned me in his will," I said, keeping my voice steady. "That's what matters." Elena tapped her tablet. "With all due respect, running a dealership isn't like fixing cars in someone's garage. We have inventory worth millions, client relationships that took decades to build, and a reputation that's very easy to damage." "I'm not here to damage anything," I said, meeting her gaze. "I'm here to learn." David leaned forward, his expression curious rather than hostile. "You worked at Sal's, right?" "I know Sal. Good guy. Taught you diagnostics?" "Everything from brake lines to transmissions." "That's more than most owners know," David said. "Half the dealers I've worked for couldn't tell you the difference between a crankshaft and a camshaft." Tom snorted. "Knowing how to fix a car doesn't mean you can sell one." "Then teach me," I said. "I'm not pretending I know everything, but I'm not walking away either." Rachel glanced at the others, then back at me. "Vincent believed in you. That has to count for something." Elena sighed. "Fine, but if this place starts losing money, we're having a different conversation." Over the next 2 weeks, I lived at that dealership. I arrived before dawn and left after dark, shadowing Tom during sales calls, sitting in on finance meetings with Elena, walking the lot with Rachel to memorize every vehicle's specs and history. David became my anchor. He let me work in the service bays during downtimes, and I discovered that the mechanics here were artists, not just technicians. They didn't just fix problems, they restored machines to something close to perfection. But the real education came from watching the clients. These weren't people buying cars out of necessity. They were buying dreams, status, the feeling of control that came from owning something rare and powerful. Tom was a master at reading them, knowing when to push and when to step back, when to talk horsepower and when to talk heritage. I was terrible at it at first. My first solo sale attempt, a middle-aged doctor interested in a Jaguar F-Type, ended with him walking out after I accidentally compared the car's exhaust note to a modified Civic. Tom pulled me aside afterward, half amused and half exasperated. "Kid, you can't talk to these people like they're at Sal's. They don't want to hear about budget builds, they want to feel special." "But it's the same principle," I argued. "Engineering is engineering." "Maybe, but selling isn't about engineering. It's about emotion." I thought about that a lot over the following days, and slowly I started to understand. When a client asked about a car, I stopped talking specs and started asking questions. What did they want to feel when they drove it? What memories did they want to create? It wasn't manipulation, it was connection. And once I figured that out, things began to shift.
By the end of the month, I'd made my first sale, a used Audi R8 to a software engineer who reminded me of myself, young, hungry, wanting to prove something to the world. When he drove off the lot grinning like a kid on Christmas morning, Rachel squeezed my shoulder. "You're getting it," she said. But I wasn't satisfied with just getting it. I wanted more.
3 months in, I realized the dealership had a problem. It catered almost exclusively to established wealth, and it was bleeding younger clients to competitors who offered certified pre-owned imports at better prices. Tom's approach was old school. Wait for buyers to come to us, cultivate long-term relationships, never discount. But the market was changing, and we weren't changing with it. I pitched the idea during a management meeting in June. A certified pre-owned program specifically targeting first-time luxury buyers, people in their 20s and 30s who wanted quality but couldn't afford brand new. We'd offer transparent pricing, extended warranties, and, most importantly, a no-pressure sales environment. Elena looked skeptical. Luxury buyers don't want no pressure. They want to feel like they're getting something exclusive. Not all of them, I said. Some of them just want a good car and to be treated with respect. I was one of them a year ago. Tom frowned. This isn't Sal's, Marcus. We're not a budget lot. I'm not saying we become one. I'm saying we expand our market without cheapening our brand. We already take trade-ins. Why not refurbish them to showroom quality and sell them with the same level of service we give new clients? David nodded slowly. It could work. We've got the base space, and I've got techs who could handle the refurb work. Rachel pulled up a spreadsheet. If we price strategically, we could move 10 to 12 units a month without cannibalizing new sales. Elena studied the numbers, then looked at me. You'd be responsible for this. If it fails, it's on you. Deal, I said. We launched the program in July, and I poured everything into it. I personally inspected every pre-owned car that came through, working late into the night with David's team to ensure they were flawless. No rattles, no leaks, no compromises. I rewrote the website copy to emphasize transparency and quality. I even shot videos explaining our inspection process, uploading them to YouTube and Instagram. The first month, we sold 3 cars. The second month, 8. By the third month, we had a waiting list, and younger buyers started coming in specifically for the program. They appreciated the honesty, the lack of gimmicks, the sense that we actually cared about what they drove off the lot. Tom pulled me aside one afternoon, his expression hard to read. I didn't think this would work, he admitted, but you were right. These kids, they trust you. They don't trust me. It's not about trust, I said. It's about respect. You taught me that. He grunted, but there was something like approval in his eyes. Around this time, word started spreading. Other dealers noticed our numbers. Industry blogs wrote about the young owner revitalizing a legacy dealership. And then, inevitably, my father heard. He called on a Thursday evening in late September, his voice tight and controlled. I saw an article about Rossi Premier. They mentioned your name. Yeah, I said, leaning back in Vincent's old office chair, my chair now. Things are going well. You inherited a dealership. It wasn't a question. I did. There was a long silence. Then, I suppose you think you've proven something. I'm not trying to prove anything to you, Dad. I'm just building something I care about. You're still just a grease monkey with a fancy address. I should have felt anger, but all I felt was a strange kind of pity. If that's what you need to believe. He hung up. Rachel, who'd been standing in the doorway, raised an eyebrow. Family? Something like that. For what it's worth, she said, Vincent would be proud of you. Hell, I'm proud of you. That night, I stood alone in the showroom after everyone had gone home, looking at the rows of gleaming cars and feeling something I hadn't felt in years, purpose. And that's when I decided it was time for the next step. The Aston Martin DB11 arrived in early November, a private sale from a collector in Boston who'd kept it in a climate-controlled garage and driven it fewer than 2,000 miles. It was midnight blue with a tan leather interior, every surface immaculate, the kind of car that made you hold your breath when you touched it. It was also the exact car my father had talked about for years, the one he'd bookmarked on auction sites, the one he'd called the pinnacle of British engineering, the one he'd never been able to justify buying. I bought it the day it came available. David whistled when we unloaded it from the transport truck. You planning to sell this or keep it? Neither, I said. Not yet, anyway. I spent 2 weeks with that car, not driving it much, just understanding it. I learned its quirks, the way the twin-turbo V12 purred at idle, the way the exhaust note shifted when you opened it up on the highway. I detailed it myself, every inch, until it looked like it had rolled off the factory floor that morning. And then, on a cold Saturday in late November, almost exactly 1 year after my father had thrown my tools into the snow, I drove it to Webb Financial Consulting. The office was in a sleek downtown building, all glass and steel, the kind of place where everyone wore suits and no one smiled unless they were closing a deal. I parked the Aston Martin directly in front of the entrance, its blue paint catching the afternoon light like liquid metal. My father was walking out with a client, both of them laughing about something when he saw the car. He stopped mid-sentence, his gaze locking on to the DB11 with an intensity I recognized, the same way he used to stare at cars and magazines, at things he wanted but couldn't have. Then he saw me standing beside it. His expression shifted. Confusion, then recognition, then something uglier. The client excused himself, sensing the tension, and my father walked over, slowly, his hands in his coat pockets. "That's an Aston Martin," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "DB11, I confirmed. 2019, twin-turbo V12, 630 horsepower. You used to talk about this exact model." He circled the car, his eyes tracing every line. "Where did you get this?" "I bought it, through the dealership." "The dealership," he said like the words tasted bitter. "The one you inherited?" "The one I'm running, yeah." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Envy. Not just for the car, but for what it represented. A world he'd worked his whole life to be adjacent to, but never quite enter. "What do you want, Marcus?" he asked finally. "To rub it in my face? To prove you're better than me?" "No," I said quietly. "I wanted you to see what I built. Not because I'm trying to hurt you, but because I need you to understand that I'm not the failure you made me out to be." "I never called you a failure. You called me a grease monkey. You told me I'd never amount to anything." He flinched, but didn't deny it. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folded piece of fabric, a detailing uniform, deep blue with Webb embroidered above the pocket. I held it out to him. "What is this?" he asked. "A job offer," I said. "We're expanding the service department. I need someone to manage the detailing crew. It's honest work, pays well, no business degree required." His face went pale, then red. "You want me to wash cars?" "I want you to understand what it feels like to build something with your hands, to care about the work, not just the paycheck. But if you'd rather keep pretending that people like me don't matter, then keep the uniform, frame it, whatever helps you sleep." I tossed the uniform onto the hood of the Aston Martin and walked back to the driver's side. "Marcus!" I paused, one hand on the door. "I didn't think you'd actually make it," he said, his voice strained. "I thought if I pushed you hard enough, you'd give up and come back, do it my way." "I know," I said, "but I'm not you, Dad, and I don't want to be." I got in the car, fired up the engine, that glorious, thundering roar, and pulled away, leaving him standing there with the uniform in his hands. But this wasn't the ending. 2 weeks passed. The dealership hit record sales for the quarter. The pre-owned program was featured in a regional business journal, and I started getting calls from other dealers asking for advice. Life was good, better than good. But there was a hollow space I couldn't quite fill, a knot in my chest that wouldn't untie. Then, on a Monday morning in early December, Rachel buzzed my office. "Someone's here to see you, no appointment." "Who?" "Your father." I almost told her to send him away, but curiosity, or maybe something deeper, made me agree. He walked into my office looking smaller than I remembered, his suit wrinkled, his tie slightly askew. He was carrying the detailing uniform. "I'm not here to take the job," he said before I could speak. "I'm here to apologize." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. He sat. "I was wrong," he continued, his voice rough, "about you, about what matters, about everything.
I built my career on telling people what success looks like, and I convinced myself I was right. But seeing you now, seeing what you've built, I realize I don't know a damn thing." I didn't know what to say, so I stayed quiet. "I read the article about you," he went on, "about the pre-owned program, about how you're making luxury cars accessible to younger buyers. It's smart, it's thoughtful, it's not something I could have done." "You could have," I said. "You're not stupid, Dad. You're just stubborn." He laughed bitterly. "That's generous. It's true." We sat in silence for a moment, the office filled with the low hum of the dealership outside, phones ringing, clients talking, the distant sound of an engine starting in the service bay. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said finally, "but I want you to know I'm proud of you. I should have said that a long time ago." The knot in my chest loosened, just a little. "I don't need your approval anymore, Dad, but I wouldn't mind having your respect." He nodded slowly, his eyes glassy. "You have it. You've had it for a while. I was just too stubborn to admit it." Over the next few months, something unexpected happened. My father started showing up. Not as an employee, not as someone looking for handouts, but as someone genuinely curious about the business. He'd stop by on Saturdays, ask questions about inventory, listen to Tom's sales pitches, watch David's teamwork. He even took a shift detailing one weekend just to see what it was like. "It's harder than it looks," he admitted afterward, his hands raw from buffing compound. "Everything is," I said. By February, exactly 1 year after he'd kicked me out, we'd settled into an uneasy but functional rhythm. We weren't close, not the way some fathers and sons were, but we were something. We were talking, and that was enough. On the anniversary of that day, I drove the Aston Martin to his house, the house I used to call home. He was standing in the driveway, waiting, and when I got out, he handed me something. My old toolbox, the one he'd thrown into the snow, now polished and repaired, every tool cleaned and organized. "I kept it," he said quietly, "in the garage. I didn't know why, but I couldn't throw it away." I took the toolbox, feeling its familiar weight, and something inside me finally fully let go. "Thanks, Dad." "No," he said, "thank you." We stood there for a long time, two men who'd spent years misunderstanding each other, finally finding common ground in the space between what was said and what was meant. And when I drove away that night, the Aston Martin's engine humming beneath me, I realized Vincent Rossi had given me more than a dealership. He'd given me a second chance, not just to build a business, but to rebuild myself, and maybe, just maybe, to help my father do the same. The road ahead wasn't perfect. There would be more arguments, more misunderstandings, more moments where the past tried to pull us backward. But for the first time in years, I wasn't running from it. I was driving forward, tools in hand, ready to rebuild whatever came next. One bolt, one conversation, 1 mile at a time.